This program, of course, is presented by Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the most widely read, widely sold, and respected wrestling magazine in the world today.
Welcome to the Pro Wrestling Illustrated podcast, number 10, Dan, is that right?
I think so. Time flies when you're having fun, huh?
Yeah. By WWE math, this makes it our 10th anniversary, right?
Yes, it does.
Happy anniversary, Dan.
Once in a lifetime.
And yes, my co-host, Dan Murphy here, as always, fellow senior writer, Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And this week we've got a packed house. We've got two other Pro Wrestling Illustrated writers. Contributing writer, Mike Bessler. Mike, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
And contributing writer, Kevin McElvaney. How are you, Kevin?
Good. Glad to be here.
We are all gathered here today because we're going to be talking about the PWI Poll that Dan is working on. It'll come out, I guess, later this summer. Dan's just now kind of buckling down, interviewing people, polling people to put this thing together. And he's asked us to take the poll unofficially. So that's what we're going to be doing this episode. Dan's compiled a number of questions that are hot on the minds of wrestling fans and writers. And we haven't heard of them before, so we're going to be giving our spontaneous, honest answers, and it should be a lot of fun. Before we do that, why don't Mike and Kevin talk a bit more about what you do for the magazine? Why don't we talk first with Mike?
I've been around since 2010. I think that was my first article with PWI, and these days I'm writing Before the Bell and the Independent Roundup. And along with Kevin, I also do quite a bit on PWI's official Twitter account, which I'll plug right now as @officialPWI.
Yeah, and Mike actually has to go before long because he's got a live tweet impact. And I should say that Mike very often is the voice of dissent, for better or for worse, including in an email debate this morning, the subject that we can't address. But that's what makes, I think, Mike valuable to the team. Very often he keeps us in check.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. And Kevin, talk a bit about what you do for the magazine.
Okay, so I've actually had two stints at the magazine. This is my second one, but I guess it goes back to about 2007. Contribute articles to the magazine, and right now, along with Mike, doing the official PWI Twitter, @officialPWI again, get that plug in as much as possible. I do the weekly Monday Night Raw live tweeting. So if you're reading coverage of Raw, that's me. And, yeah, it's good to be on here. And if you're not already following us on Twitter, do that.
Yeah. And this group plus Stu Sachs, I should mention, is pretty much who puts together the PWI 500 every year also, with some input from some other writers and contributors, that kind of thing. So we're anxious to take this poll. Before we do that, why don't I give people some information about how they can subscribe to PWI. One thing that happened this week, the new cover of the June issue dropped earlier this week. It's Seth Rollins on the cover, and he's kind of the poster boy for the annual PWI report card, where... Well, Dan, you worked a lot on the report card. Why don't you talk a bit about what it's all about?
Well, what we're looking at is the issue that's coming out now with Seth Rollins on the cover. That's our report card issue that we do every year. And basically what we do is we look at about 100 to 150. It kind of varies depending on the year and the space we have available. But we look at some of the top wrestlers and we grade them, from A+ to F with incomplete, whatever the case may be, on everything that they've accomplished over the past year. And what's kind of neat about it is you're not just grading people based on, how many world titles have you won, for example. For example, Seth Rollins got an A+, and he never won the world title. But if you look at each wrestler and see how they've improved from where they were 1 year ago and what their individual goals would have been and their individual progress, that's how we grade them. So it's kind of a sliding scale, a little bit of a curve, but it's fun to do, and it's a really good way to see who's really overachieved and who's underachieved over the past year.
Yeah, people usually look at the PWI 500 and then the Achievement Awards as the two kind of metrics for wrestlers. But the report card is really valuable as well. I think it's probably, of all of those, the best individual looks at each wrestler's performance over a year. I have a lot of fun checking that out every year. Disagree sometimes. That's what makes these things a lot of fun. So,
so do the wrestlers. I don't
doubt it.
I had Christopher Daniels come up to me one time, and it was really kind of. He's like, "A C? What the hell? How do C?"
Yeah, and I know I do it.
We're in tag teams. You want to no.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the wrestlers themselves get a little bit on edge every once in a while.
And I know I do it. I imagine other readers do it too. You go right to the back and see who got an F.
Oh yeah.
You know? So it's a lot of fun. Yeah, that is one of the big features of the next issue. That's going to be dropping later this month, and even sooner than that on the digital version. You can check it out at PWI-online.com. While you're there, subscribe.
The version is not available.
That's right. Is it available now?
It is.
Okay, great. So even more reason to do it. Check it out. If you're interested in the digital version, pick it up right now. You can subscribe to 6 issues of the digital version for $14.99. That's just $2.50 an issue. As I said, it's available several weeks before the print edition is. And if you want the print edition and want to subscribe to the print edition, you can do so. Get 6 issues for just under $21, $3.50 an issue, half off the cover price. A great deal. You get an even deeper discount if you subscribe for 12 issues. The report cards in the next issue, I know I've got my interview with Albert El Patron in there. I got a feature on WrestleMania 1 versus WrestleMania 31. What did you guys, Mike and Kevin, do for the upcoming issue?
I did the indie roundup. That's kind of my thing.
Okay.
And I did Before the Bell.
Okay, yeah. Actually,
usually Mike, but... Yeah.
We're part of Before the Bell, aren't we? I think it's going to feature 2 very handsome broadcasters.
Oh my gosh, that's right. They had to provide some headshots for that were
Well, guys, that's actually why Stu asked us to come on the show. We needed to let you know that had to be cut for space. So sorry about that.
So yeah, go to pwi-online.com for all that information. As Mike mentioned, follow us at official PWI and drop us a line here at pwipodcast@outlook.com. Also use that email to give us your own feedback on this poll we're about to take. We'd love to hear what you guys think, whether we're way off, whether we nailed it, all of that. So without any further ado, Dan, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now like the report cards that we were just talking about, the PWI poll is a feature that we run every year. And whereas the report cards are something that we as a team grade, making those grades and determining where people have finished, the PWI poll is the voice of the fans. And what we do is, instead of opening it up like the achievement awards or anything along those lines, we actually contact a random sampling of PWI subscribers. So another good reason to kind of get your voice heard and get a subscription to PWI, either a print subscription or a digital or online version. What we do is we contact them, we ask them 50 questions, compile all of that, and put it together. And again, it's a poll to really show where the temperature of the fans, gauge the reaction to who's hot, who's not, who's performing, who's not performing, and what they like about the current state of the sport. So what we thought would be a good idea is for us to go over a few questions here, talk about them as a group, and see if, whereas we're not finished compiling the current poll right now, I do know who won certain categories, so I'm not going to reveal anything tonight, but we can talk about what our opinions are and see how close we are to the opinions of the respondents that we sampled.
All right.
So, okay, we'll go with the first question. These are a lot of these are the questions that we use every year. This is question number 1, and it's very simply: who is, pound for pound, the best wrestler in the world?
All right. I was anticipating this one. I guess I'll start.
Go ahead.
Pound for pound, best wrestler in the world. Well, in as much as you do mention pound for pound in there, I think it's got to be Daniel Bryan. I imagine he will lead the poll and win the poll. And I think it is significant that he's kind of undersized. You know, I was thinking about Brock Lesnar, and that Brock Lesnar is so destructive, but then you got to think take his size and his weight into account, and maybe that takes away a little bit from the whole pound for pound thing. Daniel Bryan, kind of on the small side, still super effective. I will go with him.
And quickly, before anyone else, Daniel Bryan has won the award 7 times in the past.
Wow, okay.
So, I mean, he's had a heck of a run with it.
So safe pick.
So, Mike, what do you think?
I would probably say Daniel Bryan, and you know, the 4 of us we've debated these things and discussed these things for years now. So I'm surprised to hear Al lead with Daniel Bryan because I thought that I would be the first one to say him, but I can't see a strong case for anybody necessarily having better in-ring skills. If I had to pick a close second, it would actually be Seth Rollins because I think he's improving by leaps and bounds. But I'd go with Daniel Bryan.
Okay, Kevin.
I don't disagree with either of you, but I think we have to add in a vote for AJ Styles. And AJ Styles, pound for pound, I mean, he is under 6 feet tall. He's basically a cruiserweight size, but he's competed around the world, and especially the past couple of years as a heavyweight in New Japan and Ring of Honor, and of course before that with TNA. And I think he's proven that he's as good as anybody. And I think he definitely has to be mentioned alongside Daniel Bryan, especially when you're considering things like size. He's certainly not an oversized competitor, but I mean, he can get in the ring with anybody, and it's going to be a great match. He's going to come out of the match better than he went into it, and so is his opponent. So,
I really like Mike bringing up Seth Rollins. I'm almost tempted to change my pick, if only because he's been so much more active. I'll stick with Daniel Bryan, but I really like Seth Rollins.
And I want to say too on AJ Styles, I got to see him at a Ring of Honor show in Dayton, near where I live, last year, and I was only a few rows back. And as a wrestling fan, it was just such a great experience. It was the first time I had ever seen him compete live in person, and to be that close to the action, I could see just how good he really is. So I think that's a great point.
Now, one thing that I'll let you guys know, and I'm not going to give away who's winning because we haven't fully finished the poll yet, but the top 2 guys are not anyone who is named as of this moment right now. Yeah. Now,
so what do we know? Wow, that is a surprise.
One thing to keep in mind is that this is a thing that's interesting with the PWI poll, because it is from a random sampling of our subscribers, and it'll be a little bit different than because you're looking at different age groups, different geographic regions, and so on. But what I think in looking at everything, Bryan and Styles have been going up against heavyweights so often that people kind of look to them as fitting in with the heavyweight division. And I think that pound-for-pound bit has kind of haunted them, because the top 2 are people who are significantly smaller than those 2.
Yeah, and
so say any more, I'll pass this out the way, but that's what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, and I guess it's tough to even talk about pound for pound when we're talking about pro wrestling, because there aren't real weight divisions. If you look at the pound for pound rankings in UFC, they really mean a lot more, because you don't have a Cain Velasquez fighting a Demetrius Johnson,
right.
But you do have, well, at least a lot of us wish we did have a Daniel Bryan wrestling a Brock Lesnar. So yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, next question: what is wrestling's most devastating finishing maneuver?
Also anticipating this one.
Al,
give
do you
some
want to
thought.
think about this?
Yeah, let me think about this.
And this is tough too, because some fans will answer this. This is kind of something with the poll. They'll think of it as their favorite finisher or the flashiest finisher. Others will think of it as the one that once it's applied, nobody tends to get up. So
okay. Well, given that, I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'm going to say the Accolade, in as much as Rusev is undefeated. And it's not kind of a phony undefeated. He just beats everybody pretty much. And the guys that don't tap to the Accolade pass out to the Accolade, including John Cena. So I can't think of a move that's been more effective or more devastating than that. So that's what I'll go with.
Okay. What about you, Mike?
Well, and I think the Accolade is basically what the Devil's Triangle, the Camel Clutch, a variation of that. And I remember growing up watching. There was a monster heel in ICW in Lexington called Radamias, and that was his finisher. It always seems to do people in. But as convincing as Rusev is, and I know he's got his undefeated streak and everything, I'm going to go with the curb stomp.
Yeah.
Just because of how many guys at the top of the card have been done in by that match over the last several months. And I think Lesnar even bit it on the curb stomp once. So that's got my vote locked up.
What about you, Kevin?
Well, you probably heard the audible groan after Mike picked that, because that was my pick. So, thanks, Mike. You should have known somehow.
Sure.
Yeah, the curb stomp. Apart from what Mike just said, and yeah, it certainly put Lesnar. I remember the one time on Raw, it kept him on the mat for probably a solid minute. So I mean, you look at that has to be viewed as a devastating move if it does that to Brock Lesnar. But it also put Randy Orton out of contention. Now, granted, there were Dean Ambrose for a short period of time. I mean, granted, there was some scenery involved with that. There was a cinder block with Ambrose, but yeah, it's a move that can put people out, and that really, speaking of Orton, kind of reminds me of his punt that you don't see anymore, and that kick to the head, and it's not unlike that, and it always looks brutal, and it always is effective. So I would have to go with that.
Okay. And now last year, what won in this category was Daniel Bryan's running knee strike. Mm-hmm. The curb stomp, I agree, it is a brutal-looking move, a vicious move, and I'm really kind of surprised that it, in this era of sensitivity to head injuries and concussions and everything else, I'm almost surprised that it's not a move that banned. I don't think it should be banned, but given the overall sensitivity and how vicious that move looks, it's one that wouldn't surprise me if it did get banned sometime in the near future.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Who is wrestling's best brawler? And we're this is another tough question because, brawling isn't like it was back in the 80s where you had guys like Bruiser Brody or Abdullah the Butcher or the Sheik or guys like that. A lot of the guys that are considered brawlers today are guys like one of the persistent contenders in this category is like Samoa Joe, who uses a lot of striking, but it's more of a C style than traditional barroom brawling. But that being said, Al, who would you go with as the best brawler today?
This is the downside to not thinking about these ahead of time. You got to kind of go through the whole Rolodex of wrestling rosters in your head.
But that's exactly what the panelists do
right.
as well too. So when you look at something after the fact and say, what about this guy? This guy's overlooked. The same thing when you conduct these polls. But that also gives an indication of who's top of mind and who the fans are thinking about when they're polled.
All right. And I guess this is just thinking about the kind of matches he's had in the last year, some of those wars with Seth Rollins. I'm going to go with Dean Ambrose. The whole idea of him being, the lunatic fringe, kind of, out of control. He seems like a good fit for this category. Now, I'm sure Mike or Kevin are going to bring somebody up that's going to make me regret this pick, but at least for now, I'll go with Dean Ambrose. And I'm going to pull up a WWE roster right now.
Ambrose has a lot of support in the category.
What's that?
Yeah, Ambrose is getting a lot of support in the category.
Okay.
Not alone with that. Mike, what do you think?
Boy, I really wish I could cast a vote for Phil Hickerson here just for posterity. Because, when I think brawlers, that's always the first, the image of him, comes to mind. But, and this is a dark horse, and I hope people tap into this guy, but Bram from TNA is so good at it, at brawling. I would put him up there with I would put him up there with Ambrose. Again, if this comes down to casting my vote, that's who I'm filling in for.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of this, right, Dan? I mean, there is no right answer. It's just whoever we pick.
Well, whoever the fans pick. Exactly. Yeah.
Right, and us, at least for this exercise, being fans.
All right, Kevin, what about you?
All right. Ambrose actually, Al, is the first guy I thought of too. So that was a really good pick. I can't say that the one I have in mind is better per se, but I had to add him to the discussion. I would have to say Kevin Owens. And even though Kevin Owens is not necessarily throwing punches all over the place, he really has that smash mouth kind of style. When he's doing something where he's off his feet, he's more often than not just throwing himself at the other guy. He's tossing him into things around ringside. And when I think of brawling, that's what I think of, just like whatever works. Not so much the wrestling holds, just whatever is going to cause the most damage. And I think he has to be put in there as a strong contender, too. I think officially, I would probably agree with Ambrose. He's the first person who jumped into my head, but I'll add a runner-up in there for Kevin Owens.
I will tell you that Kevin Owens had a huge spike in support after he won the championship, the NXT title.
A brutal match, yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of people thinking along the same lines. Yeah. And for history's sake, last year the winner in this category was Luke Harper. All right. Next question. Who is wrestling's best aerialist? Al, who's the best high flyer?
I think I'd probably go with Adrian Neville over in NXT. I know before he went there, he earned that reputation of being the man that Gravity forgot. I think he carried over that to NXT. I'm trying to, again, think of guys who could maybe give him a run for his money. I'll go with him for now.
He's another guy who's gotten a lot of support. Okay. Yep. What about you, Mike?
Jeremy Borash had a really great move. It was a couple of weeks ago, but it was a jaw dropper. Just take my word for it, even if you don't watch. But in all seriousness, I would probably. I think Sami Zayn is a good selection. I would get behind that.
A lot of great guys in NXT, of course.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we're really seeing, I think, with this PWI poll is the influence of NXT is really pretty significant. We're seeing a lot of the fans are looking at NXT guys. And maybe that's because of a real trend, or it's just that they're the hot flavor right now, but there's a big NXT presence.
Yeah, even in what the thought process is, I think it's revealing. I mean, you asked me that question, and, you do these split-second kind of, decisions in your mind, and one of the first things I thought was, well, you got to pretty much throw out WWE, and maybe that's not totally fair. There are some good high flyers there, but in as much as they generally, historically, have not valued that kind of wrestling, I think the default does become NXT. In as much as TNA is got a much lower profile this year, you could certainly think about guys in Ring of Honor. But yeah, that's interesting. I went, and I think a lot of us go right to NXT.
I actually do have a pick that's different from NXT, though. I wanted to introduce that idea. But I'm going to go with Kota Ibushi. So, he's just phenomenal, has been. The things he does are unreal. You talk about with Adrian Neville, some of that man that Gravity Forgot moniker. I mean, some of the things that Ibushi, I need a sip of water, does are just unreal. You can't believe them when you're seeing them. And I would have to put him even over Neville, as good as Neville is when it comes to high flying.
Okay, and Ibushi has gotten some support. He doesn't have the prominence or the visibility a lot of other people do, but he's definitely come up. And one of the other guys who's come up a little bit too is, he's under two different names. You may know him as Ricochet, or if you watch Lucha Underground, it's Prince Puma. And because of that kind of double exposure, you combine those two sets of votes, and he's another guy on the on the list. Okay, then the next question: who is wrestling's best technical? Who's the best of the sweet science, as it were?
Okay. Again, interesting where my mind goes. I think WWE, I think Daniel Bryan, and some of those guys, but then I jump to Ring of Honor, and I think about some technicians there. I'm going to go with AJ Styles for this category. And I'm, kind of balancing between him and Daniel Bryan, thinking about the work AJ's done in Japan and Ring of Honor, and Bryan, again, having taken a lot of time off over the last year, I think it leans a little bit in favor of AJ Styles.
What about you, Mike?
I'm gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna go with Daniel Bryan. Still got it. Still looks as good as he ever has, especially since he's gotten so big, even despite the time off, and despite a little bit of a kind of a bumpy return to WWE with losses and disappointments and things like that. He's clearly still got it. I think he's still the man to beat in that category.
And Bryan has dominated this category for the past decade or so. So, again, it's a good pick. Kevin?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Daniel Bryan, too. I think